Sully's on the couch and he's ready to go, and Scout's behind the computer and trying to smack my hand when I move the mouse around. So I guess she's ready to go and I'm ready, and hopefully you're ready. Today I want to talk with you about the Buffalo Soldiers. The Buffalo Soldiers were formed right after the Civil War, and it was groups of all Black cavalry and infantrymen. So let's get my screen shared here with my mad skills. Thanks, Scout. Wasn't an earthquake, that's just Scout. She jumped down and now she's back up. And we're gonna do that one. Okay, we'll try that again. Don't do that, you're not helping, thank you. And that's her tail going back and forth there. In case you wonder what that windshield wiper effect is, it's just Scout's tail. Why don't you move over? That'll be better. Okay, so in 1866, right after the Civil War ended, and right after the Congress had passed the 13th Amendment, which made slavery illegal, and now they have all of these freed people who had previously been slaves, and they got to have jobs because nobody's providing for them any longer. They have to take care of themselves, which I'm sure they are fine with, but they have to have jobs. And so a lot of them joined the army. And Congress passed the legislation to form the first segregated Black cavalry and infantry units. Now, segregated means it was only Black soldiers, but most of the officers were white officers. They didn't give command of most of these units to Black officers. Occasionally, one or two got to be officers in the cavalry, but it was very unusual. They had the 9th and 10th Cavalry units who were sent out west to fight in the Indian Wars, because remember, they had pushed most of the Indian tribes, the Native American tribes, out towards the west because that's where most of the unsettled land was. And now they're starting to move people into that unsettled land, and now they want that land. So they got to do something with all these Native Americans who are not real happy about the idea that we got pushed out of the East, and now you want this too? No. The 24th and 25th Infantry units often fought alongside the cavalry. Now, the cavalry fights on horseback at this time. They are the more mobile troops. The infantry are the ones that march on their feet, and they don't have any real other way to get any place except basically by walking. They're the ones that just march. And like I said, they primarily had white officers. These units of men came to be known as the Buffalo Soldiers, and nobody's really sure where the name came from. There seem to be two different explanations of this term. The first is that the Comanche Indians gave the name to the soldiers because they were very fierce and they fought very well and they respected them, and so they called them Buffalo Soldiers because they respected the buffalo and hunted the buffalo. I don't know. Another thing says that the name may have been a reference to the soldiers' hair because their hair tended to be very curly and thick and dark hair, and it sort of looked a little like some of the hair on the buffalo's head and chest. You know, they have that dark curly hair on their head and chest, and so they may have referred to them like that, but they may have been part buffalo, not understanding how, genetics actually work. But either way, the men in these units regarded this name, Buffalo Soldiers, as a term of respect, and they referred to themselves eventually as Buffalo Soldiers. And I think it was the 9th Cavalry Unit even took the buffalo as part of their insignia that they used to represent their troop. The American Indian Wars went on for almost 20 years after the Civil War got over. They fought with Native Americans. The Buffalo Soldiers were out there. They would catch cattle thieves. They helped build roads. They helped protect settlements and mail stagecoaches. And they even at some point acted as park rangers when the early parks were being formed. They would help protect the parks and keep people from hunting in those parks. Basically, they did a lot of different things that, were necessary. And were very good at them, apparently. In 1898, the Spanish-American War began. Now, the Spanish government had control of the island of Cuba, which, if you don't know, is only about 90 miles from the tip of Florida. And so it's very close to the United States. Cuba was being, the Cuban people were being brutalized by the Spanish government. An American warship, the Maine, was sent to kind of oversee the situation and see what was going on, and it mysteriously blew up in the harbor. And so the American people, a lot of people were very upset about this. And Theodore Roosevelt, who was the naval secretary, the Secretary of the Navy at that time, was very upset about all of this, and he thought we should go to war to take Cuba away from the Spanish. And he actually began forming a group of people, a group of soldiers who he called the Rough Riders. They trained actually in San Antonio, Texas, and eventually went and sailed to Cuba, fought with the Spanish, defeated the Spanish, and took over Cuba. A large portion of his troops were made up of Buffalo Soldiers. They trained and fought and went to Cuba and fought there with the American forces. Then in 1916, from 1916 to 1917, there was a Mexican bandit named Pancho Villa who was raiding up into the United States from Mexico. He was stealing cattle. I believe there may have been some settlers that were killed. I think there were some farmhouses that were burned. At some point, I think we're going to look at Pancho Villa because he's kind of interesting. They sent the Buffalo Soldiers, who were then commanded by General Pershing, who not very long after this would take over the command of the American Expedition Forces during World War II. He was called Black Jack Pershing. And they hunted Pancho Villa. They never did catch him. He would just go back across the border, and they didn't have authority to go into Mexico to hunt him, and so they never did catch him. In 1948, the Buffalo Soldiers supported other troops during World War I and World War II. They fought. The cavalry was no longer riding horses during World War II, but they did fight alongside the white soldiers. They were still segregated units. They still did not allow them to fight in the same units as white soldiers. They just had black units and white units, which is kind of dumb, but that's the way they thought back then. But in 1948, President Harry Truman issued an executive order, which means it doesn't get voted on by Congress. It's just an order he makes, and it is subject to review by the Supreme Court. So he can't do anything too really outrageous because it can get struck down as unconstitutional. But he did issue an executive order ending the segregation in the armed forces and saying that, okay, now when a black person enters the U.S. Army, not sure what Bass is doing in there, but he's making a lot of noise. When a black person enters the U.S. Army or Navy or Air Force or Marines, they're going to be put into units, are going to be formed up that are all the different ethnicities, white people, black people, any other kind of people. They're all going to be in the same units. We're not going to have separate units. Everybody's in the same army. So the last segregated units were disbanded during the 1950s. This gentleman is named Mark Matthews. He was born in Alabama in 1894, just made him a whole lot older than he really was. He joined the Army when he was 16 years old. He was stationed at Fort Huachuca, Arizona, which I think is interesting because my father was in the Army during the late 50s, early 60s. He didn't ever go overseas, and he was stationed at Fort Huachuca, Arizona. And he said Fort Huachuca was in a place that it was so flat that if you ran away and went AWOL, which is basically what going AWOL means, it means being absent without leave, they could see you for 3 days because the land was so flat and there were no trees or anything. And so they didn't count you gone until you'd been gone for 3 days, because then they couldn't see you anymore. I think he may have been lying about that. But there you go. It sounds kind of funny. Mr. Matthews helped in the hunt for Pancho Villa. He served in the Pacific in World War II. He served in the cavalry during the Indian Wars as well. He retired from the Army in 1947, so just before they stopped segregating all of the units, he retired in 1947. He died in Washington, D.C. at 111 years old in 2005. He was the oldest known man to have served from the beginning to the end of the Buffalo Soldier era. I looked to see if there were still any Buffalo Soldiers alive today, and I get really mixed results. And so I think there maybe are a couple of them still alive, but I'm not sure that they came in at the very beginning like this gentleman did. I think they may have come in later when they were still referred to as Buffalo Soldiers, but may not have been out there fighting the Indians in the Indian Wars. So I think there may be a few of them left alive. I don't think there are very many at this point. There is a Buffalo Soldiers National Museum that's located in Houston, Texas. They have a lot of artifacts from the Buffalo Soldier era. They have a lot of information about the Buffalo Soldiers. It looks like it's kind of a cool deal. So if you're traveling in Houston, you might want to go and check this out because it looks like it might be, if you're a museum kind of a person, you might want to go check this out. And that is all of that. You can see with my math skills, I did that in the wrong order, but we're just going to go with it. Life goes on. Life's a little messy. You just keep moving. And since that's all I have for you today, I'm not going to go back and redo this because it'll just get worse. So if you like this, please let me know. Wave at me now. Can't see you, but you can wave. Your teacher will be happy. If you like this, give me a thumbs up, share, subscribe, all of that good stuff. Let me know in the comments. If you have anything you would like me to talk about on another time, let me know about that. I think that's all we have for today. So I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. All right, Sully, I think we're done.